Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, supporting women to let go of the ghosts from their past by exploring the hidden side of their female psyche with shamanic shadow work for women, with your host, Nicola Lucy. In this episode of the Feminine Principle podcast, I'm exploring the shadow side of a relationship breakdown. And so we've all experienced a relationship breakdown at some point in our lives, and we all know how traumatic and painful that can be. And so let's just have a look at why a relationship breaks down in the first place. And so we become comfortable. After we've got over the honeymoon stage, we become comfortable in our relationship. We become comfortable with each other. And over time, that comfort within the relationship falls into stagnancy. And we fall into habitual patterns and routine. And over time, we forget our shared dreams and our desires, and we just simply begin to exist together in this bubble. Life happens. And so what happens is that the relationship has actually reached its limitation. It's reached a boundary that is now more or less suffocating the relationship, and it's suffocating the two people within that relationship. And we've forgotten somehow the potential of the relationship. We've forgotten those deep desires of love and trust and being together and the power of being together. And so when we reach these limitations within the relationship, each member, each party of the relationship goes into their own world. They start to go into their own patterns. They start to go into their own shadow, and this obviously then activates the shadow of the relationship. And one of the reasons behind this is because in that comfort zone that has become the relationship, we forget how to be honest with each other. We forget how to activate that spark within the relationship, and we forget how to have open conversation. Open, heartfelt conversation. And this lack of honesty within the relationship also then shows that lack of honesty within the self. We're not being honest with ourselves as to what our needs are within that relationship. And so we can start to see how, by not being able to express our needs in an open and honest way, that those needs start to go inwards. They start to churn within us. And when that starts to happen, we can then experience how those triggers within the relationship start to build up. And those triggers just get bigger and bigger and bigger until we start annoying each other. We start to get on each other's nerves. And when that starts to happen, we then, as individuals within the relationship, start to look for ways to escape. And so this is where another aspect of our shadow then starts to get activated. And so in that escapism, we can get lost in the day-to-day mundane things of life, or we can start to engage in destructive behavior. And when that destructive behavior starts to come in, then it can really start to go on a downward spiral. However, that destructive behavior and that escapism is being activated because we're simply looking for a way to protect the self. We're creating this cocoon around ourselves because the pain within the relationship, the pain of not feeling fulfilled within the relationship starts to get stronger and stronger. And because we're so afraid of what that means to us as individuals, but what it means for the relationship can be so painful that we would prefer not to face it. And so it's easier for us to stay in this cocoon of the protective self. And then when this deep shadow within each person within the relationship starts to get fully activated, sooner or later it blows up. It builds and it builds and it builds, and then something triggers the breakdown. Something triggers that breaking point within the relationship. The point where we've been avoiding it for so long, it was only natural that it had to come to the surface. And we've been trying with all of our might to not get to that place. And yet here it is. It's like a volcano just erupting and everything just blows apart and it just shatters into a million pieces. And when that happens, and it does shatter into a million pieces, we say things that we don't mean. We do things that we don't mean. Because all of that anger and frustration that has been suppressed within the self starts to blow up. It starts to come out in every single way. And it's just like fire energy just being blown at each other, over each other. And of course, tears are obviously shed and words are said. And you sit there in this broken mess of looking at just everything that has been shattered around you. And that is your life together. It's blown up and it's shattered into a million pieces. And it's there on the floor. And both parties are just broken from it, heartbroken from it. And then we start to ask ourselves, like, where did we go wrong? How did we grow so far apart? What happened that made us get to this point? Why did we have to get to this point? And that's simply because the relationship reached its limitation. There was no communication anymore, so the energy within the relationship couldn't flow anymore. And that's when it became stagnant. It had reached its limitation. And therefore, when we reach our limitations, something has to break. Something has to be shattered so that it can be rebuilt in a new shape and form. And so when this breaking point arrives, we can see ourselves sat there. And I like to envision this, because I've been there many times, and I'm sure that you have too. It's like two people that shared so much love, and you're both sat at different ends of the bed or in a room with your back to each other, just looking at the mess that's on the floor. And it's like, what the hell? What has happened? But it's at this point where we realize that we have a choice. In that moment, the choice becomes so strong because a choice does need to be made. A decision does need to be made. Do we separate? Is the relationship, does it still have potential, or does it need to separate? And that can be equally painful. But it's that ability to be honest with each other and to be honest with the self, that we can understand, is separation the answer, or is it possible to lean into it, to lean into this breakdown and explore the shadow of the relationship and the limitations that we've reached within the relationship. And this is where the crucial question always comes in. Is there still love in the relationship? Is there still a shared dream or desire within the relationship? Do we still want the same things in the relationship? And so being able to answer those questions openly and honestly with the self first, and then being able to openly and honestly express the answers to those questions with each other, can really help to understand if the relationship, although it's reached its limitation, has it still got potential. And this is where we find the strength. We find this inner strength to discuss and explore whether we still have potential, whether the relationship still has potential. And so being open and honest and sharing our deepest feelings with the self, but then also within the relationship, can feel very, very tricky. We can feel very scared. We can feel worried, full of anxiety at actually speaking our truth about the relationship. And this is simply because we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to speak our truth. We don't want to be honest because we are so afraid of being rejected. While at the same time, we also don't want to reject the other. this person who we've shared a good portion of our life with, we don't want to reject them or hurt them in any way, shape or form. And we most certainly don't want to cause any more pain or heartbreak, because the heart cannot take it. It's way too painful. And yet, honesty in that moment is so vital if the relationship has the possibility and the potential to move beyond this limitation. And so this can be the breaking point. It's the breaking down and the breaking open of the relationship to then be able to explore our dream, to be able to explore whether there are still very deep feelings of love and connection there. Are there still those sparks that wish to be nurtured? Are there still those sparks that wish to continue to explore what is beyond this limitation? To be able to explore what is our shared dream and what can we do to now make that dream happen in a different way. And so those sparks are vital for any relationship. If the spark has gone and there is no spark, there is no relationship. And that can be equally challenging for us to accept, because that relationship has become so part of our identity that we're afraid of it not being part of our identity anymore, because it will make us question, well, who am I without this relationship? Who am I without this person in my life? And that is ultimately what we're afraid of. We're afraid of exploring who we are outside of that relationship. And yet the relationship has the power and the potential to help us explore it within its container. And so this is a really powerful moment. And I think what we don't understand while we're in a relationship is that we can feel very suffocated by it. We can feel unfulfilled, and we can feel that lack of stimulation from within the relationship. So we do look outside for it. And yet, if we are able to explore the shadow side of the relationship and why it's broken down, and on an individual level as well as a relationship level, we can start to recognize our own deep-seated patterns and the patterns which we have brought into the relationship in the first place. Because we do relate from an unconscious place. We have learned how to relate and to be in relationship from our wounding and our trauma and our conditioning that we have been exposed to right from the moment we were born. You know, we have learned how to be in a relationship from growing up, from our home environment, from our family environment, from our social environment. And so we come with all of these expectations and beliefs, and yet we don't really know what a relationship means, because we don't really know who we are before we enter into relationship. Many of us do not even have a sense of our own identity before we enter into a relationship. And so when two people come together with their shadow, with their baggage, and with their conditioning about what relationship is, it's no wonder that we quickly reach these limitations within the relationship. And so what we can find within the self is that we start to understand, who am I, first of all, without this person? Who am I without this person? Who am I without this relationship? When we are able to tap into that piece of gold inside of us, we are then able to show up in the relationship in a very different way, in a way which is empowered, a way in which we feel safe and secure and stable, not because we are in the relationship with the other, but because we are in deep relationship with the self. And so being in a relationship, when we do reach these limitations, It is giving us an opportunity to explore another aspect of our own hidden psyche. Something that we are bringing into that relationship that can now no longer survive. An aspect of the self that now needs to be brought into the light and to be acknowledged, so that then we can move beyond it and show up more fully into that relationship. And this is something that I've experienced, over the years. I've been with my partner now for 22 years. And before that, I have experienced very toxic relationships. But in those 22 years with my partner, we have gone through these moments of breakdown. The relationship has reached its limits, and it's reached those levels of stagnancy, and it's crumbled, it's shattered. However, what I've learned by being in relationship is that every time it shattered, it gave us an opportunity to explore our shadows individually and then as a collective, as a couple. And each time that those shadows were acknowledged and recognized and seen, we were then able to come back into the relationship with more of ourselves intact. And the one thing that has kept us going all of these years is because there is still love and there is still a shared dream. If there is no longer love and there is no longer a shared dream, then there is no relationship. And that can be really traumatic, accepting that there is no love and there is no shared dream. But it is about being honest with the self. And so that every time we go through this contraction and then this expansion, we can see the potential in the relationship to actually move beyond our understanding and our conditioning of what we have been believing that a relationship is about. And it's not all fairy tales and princes coming to rescue us and taking care of us and taking care of our safety and our security and our stability. Taking care of our safety, security and stability is our responsibility as a unique individual. Yes, if we put too much emphasis on the other person providing that safety and security and stability, then it's only natural that that relationship is out of balance in the first place. And so again, it gives us that moment to reflect and experience where we are still giving our power away within the relationship. Because a relationship is equal. It's based on balance and equality. And if one party within the relationship is fully responsible for making the other person feel safe and secure and stable and loved and cared for, and that's not reciprocated, then obviously there is an element which is completely out of balance. So to be able to bring that back into balance, there does need to be communication. There needs to be honesty. And there also needs to be the potential for each party to be receptive of that honesty. Because we all know that if we're having a conversation and we're being honest and open and truthful, if the other person is not receptive to what we are saying, then that creates even more of a breakdown. And so we carry on and we carry on and we carry on until we cannot carry on anymore, and then it just breaks down to the point of no return. And so the question is, ladies, which I would like you to think about, is where are you not being honest in your relationships? What do you want to say that is not being said? Where are you feeling stagnant in your relationship? And where have you reached a limitation in your relationship that is now asking for your attention to be brought to the surface? And what shadows are you and also your partner bringing into the relationship that now need to be looked at? Because it's that shadow that has helped to create that limitation within the relationship itself.
Are you ready to break free from the ghosts of your past, to live with more freedom and a clear sense of purpose and inner confidence? If so, book a chat with me to explore the potent magic of one-to-one shadow walking sessions at thefeminineprinciple.com.